Hello, Pisces. I'm Poetic Heretic, and this is your October 2019 astrology forecast. I'll be going over what I consider to be the most important astrological aspects and events of October 2019 for all Pisces people, Sun, Rising, and Moon, and giving you my interpretation of them. So, without further ado, let us begin. In order to understand the energy of October, we must first go back to the end of September, specifically September 28th at 2:27 p.m., when we had the new moon in Libra in your 8th house opposite Chiron. So this was the beginning of the current lunar cycle that lasts for about 28 days. And so whatever happens at the time of the new moon stretches through, like influences, like impacts that entire lunar cycle. That energy lasts for that time period. And with this one occurring at the very end of September, this current lunar cycle is lasting for almost the entirety of October, specifically until October 27th when we have the next new moon. So this new moon, as I mentioned, took place in your 8th house of business and other people's money, the house of secrets, the house of death and taxes. And so you can expect new beginnings surrounding any or all of those areas or any combination of those areas. But usually it's the emphasis is on money, on other people's money. Could be especially also your partner's money if you're in some kind of committed relationship. That sort of thing. The new moon in the 8th house is a very empowering placement, and it's a time where you're likely to begin discovering more of the underlying emotional motivations of people around you, why people do what they do. That is likely to come into your awareness more. Again, the 8th house being often about things that are sort of dark and hidden to some extent. So those things coming more into your awareness. It's a good time to set like new financial goals or stuff like that when we have the new moon in the 8th house. Now, with it being opposite Chiron, wounded healer Chiron, and this applies to everyone of every sign, by the way, this new moon, an entire lunar cycle, is infused with this idea of the healing of wounds that Chiron talks about, whether it's healing of wounds in yourself or the healing of wounds in others, or the healing of wounds in others in an attempt to heal the wounds that are matched to those in yourself. Did you follow that? I hope so, because that's kind of Chiron oversimplified. So yes, that idea of the healing of wounds basically will be with us through the majority of October. It may be going on somewhat in the background, but it's connected to this lunar cycle. On October 3rd at 4:14 a.m. Eastern Time, Mercury enters Scorpio, and thus going from your 8th to your 9th house. So, first 2 days of October, Mercury finishes up its transit in your 8th house. Mercury is our mind and our communication, and so when it's in your 8th house, your mind and communication are focused upon those 8th house matters of, again, business and other people's money, death and taxes, secrets, intimacy, that sort of thing. It should have your intuition being higher than usual. It is going to place an intellectual focus on shared resources, again, like your partner's money if you're in a committed relationship, or money when it comes to other people in general, and like business and stuff like that. But not to spend too much time on that, because that's just Mercury finishing up that transit where it's been for a number of weeks now for you. The real news is that when Mercury moves into your 9th house on October 3rd, now that mental and intellectual and communicative focus and emphasis is on ninth house matters of education and higher learning, of going far, going the distance, of foreigners and long distance travel, of that which is exotic, that which expands your horizons. So when the planet of the mind, Mercury, is transiting the ninth house like that, you can expect a lot of like big ideas and really seeing the big picture, and maybe even having something of like a mental spiritual awakening. You may find that you are really interested in an intellectual sense in big ideas and different philosophies and belief systems and stuff like that. These various ninth house matters during this time. And again, that's from October 3rd through the rest of the month. On October 4th at 12:21 a.m. Eastern Time, we have Mars entering Libra and going from your 7th to your 8th house. So, first 3 days of October, as Mars finishes up its transit through your 7th house, that's having Mars, what you prioritize and what you fight for, focused upon your house of relationships and partnerships. So, again, not to spend too much time on this because it's mostly old news at this point, but Mars in the 7th can cause ego conflicts in relationships at times, but such relationship issues are also quick to be resolved when Mars is transiting your 7th house, as Mars is all about being quick and impulsive and doing it now and let's take action now and that sort of thing. But again, the real news is that on October 4th, when Mars enters your 8th house, now the emphasis is on, yet again, those 8th house matters of business and other people's money, etc., etc. But now with Mars, it's like intimacy is activated significantly. Mars in the 8th house has your possibly experiencing ego conflicts in relationships as well, like when it was in the 7th house, but this time it's particularly about issues surrounding shared resources, surrounding jointly held money and or property. It's like your, again, 8th house, your partner's money or your partner's values and possessions are being called into focus here. And so do be aware that some basically arguments around money can possibly be an issue at this time, but it's also sort of increasing your motivation to get to the heart of things, the heart of matters, to understand why people react, why people act and react in different ways, like what makes people tick and that sort of thing. Obviously Mars is about aggression, and the 8th house is all this deep, dark intensity, and again is so strongly linked to the money of the other person. And so just be aware that there's going to be this aggressive energy surrounding money and finances this month in that sense. And again, that's from October 4th through the rest of the month. On October 8th at 1:05 p.m., we have Venus entering Scorpio, going from your 8th to your 9th house. So for the first 7.5 days of October, Venus will continue and then finish up its transit in your 8th house. Venus is what we love and what we like, what we enjoy. Venus is also money and luxury and that sort of thing. So when Venus is transiting your 8th house, it can actually be positive for money. It can be a time where you have some better luck when it comes to money. And in many cases, with it being the 8th house, this can be gaining more money through your partner, or with the help of your partner, their money helping your money in some way. Let's see, Venus in the 8th can also be a time where, like, you'll have a greater desire to reconcile issues surrounding things like money and other emotionally charged topics. It's a time where intimate relationships are often intensified, and there's this desire for a deeper union. The 8th house being heavily linked to sex and intimacy. So all of that for the first 7.5 days of October. Venus in your 8th, a love, a blessing to your financial life, and like shared power and resources and that sort of thing. So pretty much anywhere Venus goes, Venus is going to bless what it touches. In traditional astrology, it's known as the lesser benefic. So on October 8th, however, when we have that shift in the energy at 1:05 p.m. from Venus in your 8th house to Venus in your 9th house, now Venus in your 9th house is a love of the exotic. It's a time where maybe routine doesn't quite satisfy you so much anymore. And a time where, like, you gain pleasure, Venus, through that which expands your horizons, the 9th house. Venus in the 9th is a love of expansion, a love of learning and new ideas, big ideas especially, a love of philosophy and belief systems, a love of going far, of going as far as the eye can see, a love of the journey, the, like, great epic journey, not concerned about the destination, but just the journey. If you meet a new romantic partner during this time, it's likely to be someone who has a different cultural or educational background from yourself, and or someone that you would have to travel far to encounter or to be with, since the 9th house talks about long distance travel, or even still someone that you meet through travel. So a number of possibilities there. Oh, and also Venus in the 9th has you feeling and being generally extra attractive as well. So that's always nice. The 9th house sort of magnifying things, or associated with magnifying things, similar to the way that Jupiter is all about, and Venus being what is aesthetically pleasing, attractive, beautiful, all of that stuff. So very delightful, delicious energy, and that is, again, from October 8th through the rest of the month. On October 11th, Mercury enters its retrograde shadow in Scorpio, and that is in your 9th house. So I'll try to sum this up very quickly. When I say Mercury entering its retrograde shadow, I'm talking about the period of time before Mercury goes retrograde, but while it is moving through territory that it's going to be going back over during the retrograde. So it's like this. Imagine my finger is Mercury in the sky, and it's just traveling along here. And then the Mercury retrograde is like a pendulum swing. So the first pendulum swing, wait, let's put it over here. I'm watching on my screen right now. The first pendulum swing, let me try to do that right. I'm watching a very odd video feed right now. The first pendulum swing is when Mercury is in its shadow, but it's still going direct. The second pendulum swing backwards is when Mercury actually goes retrograde. And then when it goes direct, that is the third pendulum swing. And that's also the shadow. So it enters the shadow before and after. So what does this mean for you, basically? It means that on October 11th and afterwards, even though Mercury is not officially retrograde yet, it's going to feel like it is retrograde already to at least some extent. So, different people have different opinions about this. Some say that Mercury retrograde is like the end of the world. Others say that it's not much to worry about as long as you're careful. I tend to take a middle-of-the-road approach, saying that while I don't think it's the end of the world, I do think that it should be honored as much as possible, which means that, yes, I do think that you should avoid starting new things when possible during a Mercury retrograde. I do think you should be careful about miscommunication, knowing that words can easily be misinterpreted during a Mercury retrograde period. I do think you should be extra careful with technology, with technological electronic devices, knowing that they can break down and malfunction more easily during a Mercury retrograde. And yes, I do think that you should avoid traveling, or at the very least be extremely careful when traveling during a Mercury retrograde because of Mercury's association with travel. Now, that's just my perspective on it, and it's like, sure, sometimes there are life situations where maybe you have to start something new at that time, or you have to travel, or you have to do something very technical or involved with communication, and that's fine, that's understandable. I would say just really try to be extra careful during that time. But if you can choose not to, see, here's the thing. If you can easily choose not to do such things during a Mercury retrograde, then don't do them during the Mercury retrograde. You know, it's like, why risk it? Even if you think that maybe it's not that big of a deal, why risk it? I just find, for me personally, things tend to go better when I honor the energy of the cosmos, the energy of the universe. And so I do my best to do that. But hey, you can do what you want. That's just my advice. That's just what works for me. And again, that's from October 11th onward. Oh, and one more thing about that. Since it's taking place in your 9th house, you can think of any planet going retrograde as an intensification of the signal of that planet. So, as I mentioned earlier, with Mercury in your 9th house, your mind and your communication becoming much more focused upon 9th house matters of education and higher learning, that which expands your horizons, long distance travel, etc., etc. You can expect that to just intensify, basically speaking, on and after October 11th. So, there we go. I try to keep it, while I try to be thorough in my approach, I also try to keep it as simple as possible when possible, so that those who aren't obsessed with astrology like I am can hopefully understand, like, the gist of it and not get confused or lost in the details, I guess. But anyway. On October 13th at 5:07 p.m., we have the full moon in Aries in your 2nd house. But before we talk about that aspect of it, remember what I said earlier about the new moon in your 8th house that was opposite Chiron on September 28th. So, the full moon is when the energy peaks. It is when things tend to happen. It is where the action is. It is where the energy really manifests into something very often. And so all of those 8th house matters of business and other people's money and death and taxes and secrets and all of that, but especially, again, the financial aspect, I would say, and I'm going to come back to that in a moment here and tell you why that's really likely to be the most significant with this full moon. All of that 8th house stuff is likely to really peak, is likely to really manifest, is likely to really culminate at the time of this full moon, October 13th. Now, the full moon itself is in your 2nd house of money and values and interpersonal relationships. So notice that both houses that this full moon is activating, your 2nd in your 8th house talk about money. So, and this isn't always the case per se with these sorts of things. But with you, Pisces, it is this month. And so you can expect the subject of money to very much be activated on October 13th. So make of that what you will, But indeed, whether it's like other people's money or your money personally or a mixture of both, you can expect that to really culminate, or some action around that, some kind of manifestation around that on October 13th, on or around, but most likely on October 13th. Now, secondarily, since the 2nd house also talks about your values and interpersonal relationships, that might also be connected to this full moon. But again, I think the financial aspect is the most powerful for the sign of Pisces this month. On October 23rd at 1:19 p.m., the sun enters Scorpio, as it does every year around this time of year, going from your 8th to your 9th house. So in case you haven't noticed, a theme of this video is, of course, a lot of things going from your 8th house to your 9th house, and that's no coincidence. That's not like how it is normally per se. We have a lot of planets sort of clustered together currently, and that has been the case for a month or two, actually. It really got this way in August. But they are beginning to break apart right now, but they're also still, most of them, or many of them, are still sort of clustered together. And so, really, this idea of the sun going from your 8th to your 9th house is just backing up more of this shift in your overall energy from 8th house to 9th house matters. But to be thorough, obviously, we shall go over it. The sun specifically is all about life. It is the giver of life. It is our life force. It is our awareness. It is our sense of self. It is our identity. It vivifies and enlivens anything and everything it touches. It brings to life what it touches. So, while it has been, or while it is transiting your 8th house, I guess it has been as well because it moved into that later on in September, but while it is transiting your 8th house up until October 23rd, all of those 8th house matters of business and other people's money, of death and taxes, of secrets, of power dynamics and sort of emotional intensity, emotionally charged things, are coming much more into your awareness. Also, again, like your partner's money, partner's money romantically or otherwise, like a business partner or something like that as well. The money of the other, coming much more into your awareness and stuff like that. And maybe even like an identification with, being a bit more perhaps almost investigative, or seeing behind the curtain a little bit, seeing the secrets, because again, the sun bringing light and awareness to things, and the 8th house being sort of, it's the house of secrets. It's that which is not normally out in the open. So, can be a rather powerful transit, Anyway, though, when the sun then moves from your 8th to your 9th house on October 23rd, now your awareness is on going far. It is on expanding your horizons. It is on the new ideas, or the big ideas, the education and higher learning. And so now there's like this excitement about what is exotic, what is different from yourself, and all of these sorts of things. What else was I going to say about that? the sun in the ninth, yes, that there may be also then a greater identification with ninth house matters, with what expands your horizons, and with, like, say, your sense of self being one who is interested in education and higher learning, or just seeing the big picture, sort of like waking up to the overall big reality of things, that sort of thing. So that's from October 23rd through the rest of the month. On October 27th at 11:38 p.m., the sun... Sorry, I got a bit mixed up there. October 27th at 11:38 p.m., we have the new moon in Scorpio, and that is in your ninth house, opposite Uranus. And so this is finally the beginning of the next lunar cycle. The new moon in your ninth house can have you feeling a bit restless with the way things are, and a desire for adventure is building within you. And especially with all this other ninth house activity that we've already gone over in this video, I mean, it almost sounds like I'm a bit of a broken record at this point saying this, but yet again, your ninth house is being just further activated later in the month, and new beginnings surrounding education and higher learning, that which expands your horizons, long distance travel, foreigners, that which is exotic, the big ideas, the big pictures, or the big picture, that sort of thing. So expect, later in the month of October, specifically starting October 27th, sort of late at night, then I guess the first full day, October 28th, at least when dealing with Eastern time, this like growing desire for adventure and to expand into the new. So that is quite exciting. Speaking of excitement, however, this new moon is especially interesting because it has the radical placement of being opposite Uranus. Sudden, shocking, unexpected, unpredictable, weird, crazy, enlightening, and awakening Uranus. And so you can expect all of that kind of energy to be tied right into this new moon. And it's interesting because, speaking of the ninth house, having this like association with awakening and seeing the big picture and all that, Uranus is also known as the Great Awakener. It is the planet of sudden insights and sudden revelations and genius and the light bulb going off with the brilliant new idea. So I would say for you especially, Pisces, even though the Uranus energy is going to affect everyone this new moon, for you especially, Pisces, this idea of awakening is probably going to be very tied to not only this new moon on October 27th, but the entire next lunar cycle of which it is a part. So, yeah, you could have one hell of November, I guess, basically speaking. It's also interesting because the new moon is naturally a time of new beginnings, but Uranus can also, in my observation of its energy, signal new beginnings. It's like the classic idea of there's a bolt of lightning. Something just happens all of a sudden, and that particular event triggers or activates the new beginning, or that sudden, shocking, unexpected event is the very start of an entire new beginning. Like I think of the idea of like a movie or a video game that has a really good story in it, where there's just some sudden event at the beginning of the movie or the game, that then sets the protagonist off on their journey. That's how I think of the sort of Uranian event that triggers a new beginning. We could look right at this in tarot with the Fool card being associated with the planet Uranus, that sudden new beginning. But anyway, so expect that to be tied in with this new moon. Like, my theory is indeed and again, this is like applying to everyone of every sign, this aspect of it, is that there will probably be, for many people on October 27th, a sudden, shocking, unexpected event. That's the Uranian energy that then triggers or facilitates a new beginning, and that's the new moon energy. And again, for you Pisces, it's in your 9th house of education and higher learning, long distance travel, awakening to the big picture, etc., etc. So October 27th, expect the unexpected. And yes, by the way, if you're wondering, that Uranian energy should indeed carry through the entire next lunar cycle. So it's going to be interesting. On October 30th at 6:04 p.m., we have a Mercury-Venus conjunction in Scorpio, and that is in your 9th house. So when these two planets get together, Mercury, the planet of the mind, and Venus, the planet of love and harmony, it's like, let's talk things out now. Let's establish harmony by communication. Let's come to an understanding so that we can get along more. Let's be more diplomatic. Let's be more friendly. Let's be willing to talk something out that we previously were not able to establish harmony on. All of this kind of stuff is what we see with a Mercury-Venus conjunction. Now, from my own personal experiences with a Mercury-Venus conjunction relatively recently, and this may be my going out on a limb somewhat, but it has led me to a theory that can also be a time of breakthroughs, particularly concerning Mercury and Venus related things. So Mercury is communication, ideas, technology. Venus is what we love, what we enjoy, like physical possessions and that sort of thing. So breakthroughs involving those areas. It's also interesting to note, if you really want to take this to yet another level, that Mercury is said to be connected to Uranus, that like Mercury is a lower octave of Uranus. And of course, Uranus is also about breakthroughs. And we just had, as I just mentioned, that new moon opposite Uranus. So we have that. And of course, this Mercury-Venus conjunction is, as I mentioned, in your 9th house, yet again, of education and higher learning, long distance travel, awakening to the big picture, that which expands your horizons, etc., etc. And so this idea of awakening is just activated even more through this Mercury-Venus conjunction. It could be a breakthrough of that kind, or it may just be, let's talk a lot about 9th house matters, travel, education, that which is foreign and exotic, and that sort of thing. So I have one more main thing for you this month, and that is on October 31st at 11:41 a.m., Halloween Day, Mercury stations retrograde in Scorpio in your 9th house. So this is really just a little bit more information about what I said earlier about Mercury retrograde. This is the part of the month where Mercury actually turns retrograde on Halloween of all days. This is the part of the pendulum swing again where it has reached, let's see, can I do this when it's mirrored on my screen? I think I can. When it's reached the end of the first pendulum swing and it's going backwards on the second pendulum swing. So you can expect that Mercury retrograde activity or feelings or whatever to intensify more on this day, October 31st, Halloween. And again, that's in your 9th house, so even more mental intellectual and communicative focus on all those ninth house matters that we've gone over ad infinitum in this video because of where things are right now. Education and higher learning, long distance travel, foreigners, that which expands your horizons, that sort of thing. Now, a word of caution to you as Pisces individuals out there. And I had to give this to one other sign because of a similar placement, but for you Pisces, I think it applies to you more than anyone else. So, since you have all this ninth house activity this month, which is about travel, and including Mercury itself in your ninth house and going retrograde, but you have it going retrograde in your ninth house, well, as I mentioned earlier, when Mercury is retrograde, it's not a great time for travel, or at least it should, at the very least, theoretically be avoided. So I would say if you're feeling great desire to travel this month with all of this ninth house activity, maybe try to get your ninth house satisfaction in other ways. Try to expand your horizons without having to travel a whole lot or even at all if it can be avoided. But again, that's just my opinion on it. If you think that you can travel and be just fine, I know many people feel that way about Mercury retrogrades, then you're free to do that. But I just want to emphasize that it's like, on the one hand, it's like, oh, this should be a great time for travel because of the astrology. On the other hand, it's like, oh, wait a minute. No, it isn't, because Mercury is about to turn retrograde, and it's actually going to be really bad for travel. And so, but ultimately, there is no real contradiction here. I would say avoid travel during the Mercury retrograde time, including when it's in its shadow if you can. But again, you're free to make up your own mind about that. Do whatever it is that you're going to do. Just don't say I didn't warn you. All right. So that's about it, Pisces. I hope you have a delightful and magnificent month of October. It's interesting that Mercury retrograde, by the way, is happening on Halloween of all days. Maybe that'll make for a bit more otherworldly of a Halloween. Who knows? Because it's like, wow, that is specifically on that day. But regardless, happy Halloween. And if you enjoyed this video, feel free to subscribe if you're not already, as I do indeed plan on returning soon with more astrology and tarot related content, including astrology and tarot forecasts. And again, I hope you have a great month and enjoy this, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.